And then comes the artifact that jolted even the most jaded excavators, a broken amphora stamped with the name Meritaten, eldest daughter of the heretic pharaoh Akhenaten and the famous queen Nefertiti. Imagine walking across sun-baked Greek ruins and hearing the ground whisper,
I am older than you think.
what if the so-called empty edge of ancient Egypt was never empty at all? Hold that thought. Just west of Alexandria, about 43 kilometers if you follow the shoreline, archaeologists have pulled back the sand to expose Kom el Nugus, a settlement more than 3,400 years old. According to the textbooks we grew up with, nothing Egyptian belonged here until Alexander marched in 332 BCE. Yet beneath those later Greek stones lies proof that pharaohs were already staking claims, pouring wine, and posting guards on this coast while early Greece was still practicing its alphabet. Let's rewind. For decades, scholars pictured the Mediterranean fringe as a blank margin on Egypt's map, a place the Nile kings ignored. Then a series of digs between 2022 and 2024 cracked open a mound, and history blinked. The very first layers revealed a planned street grid, lined with mud brick homes and threaded by drains that might be the oldest urban drainage ever found on Egypt's northern coast. Now imagine architects who cared enough to channel coastal rainwater centuries before Rome paved its first road. Move a little farther down that street and you stumble onto blocks recycled from a grand temple. Carved cartouches shout the names of Ramses the Great and later Seti II. So Ramses, whose reign stretched from 1279 to 1213 BCE, was not satisfied with inland monuments. He threw stone and ceremony at this windswept frontier too. Think of it as a royal flag planted beside the waves, and then comes the artifact that jolted even the most jaded excavators, a broken amphora stamped with the name Meritaten, eldest daughter of the heretic pharaoh Akhenaten and the famous queen Nefertiti. That single seal drops us straight into the Amarna period around 1350 BCE, and it hints at the earliest case of branded wine on the Mediterranean. Picture a dusty warehouse where royal vintners hammered clay stamps like designer labels, advertising palace vintage, approved by the king's own household. How do we know they were really making wine on site? Because right next to those jars sits a grape-crushing installation. Ancient footprints pressed into the plaster tell a tactile story. Workers stomping fruit, juice sluicing into vats, coastal breezes carrying the sharp, sweet smell of fermentation. If you ever imagine pharaohs sipping Nile water and calling it a day, this vineyard forces a rewrite. Now mix in a surprise cast of characters, military inscriptions from private chapels mention chariot units stationed here. That sounds suspiciously like an early coast guard, protecting vineyards, trade routes, and Egypt's western frontier against Libyan raiders. Forget empty delta. We are looking at a fortified, wine-fueled hub humming with strategy and commerce centuries before the Macedonian conquest. Zoom out and the dominoes keep falling. The find drags the timeline of Egyptian coastal activity back by at least 5 centuries, forcing scholars to redraw Bronze Age trade networks. If Kom el Nugus shipped amphorae north across the sea, who was uncorking those bottles? Early Mycenaean merchants? Cypriot middlemen? Maybe even Libyan allies turned drinking buddies. Each possibility bends the usual arrows on the Mediterranean trade map. The discovery also reframes royal priorities. By the New Kingdom, pharaohs had scaled back on giant pyramids and funneled resources into border fortresses, cult temples, and economic outposts. Kom el Nugus shows that investment reaching all the way to the surf, streets, drainage, shrines, garrisons, and yes, a vineyard that merited royal branding. The coast was not a void. It was a laboratory for pharaonic logistics and diplomacy. Yet for every answer, the site lobs back a question. What did the Egyptians actually call this town? The modern Arabic name, Kom el Nugus, means Mound of the Beetles. But the true ancient label is still missing. Somewhere in the unexcavated layers may lie a doorway lintel or a clay tablet etched with the original toponym. And if the settlement handled wine exports, where is the harbor? Archaeologists are probing buried channels and silted lagoons, hunting for keystones or mooring rings that could revolutionize our picture of Bronze Age shipping lanes. Even the social fabric remains fuzzy. Did Egyptian officials trade peacefully with local Libyans, or did troops patrol a hard border? Were Greek settlers later drawn here precisely because earlier Egyptians had already tamed the landscape? Layer cake stratigraphy, Ramses-era town at the bottom, Persian period village above, Hellenistic cemetery on top, suggests 1,000 years of people returning to the same sweet spot. Something about this mound kept calling civilizations back, which brings us to you. The next time someone waves a hand over a blank part of the ancient map and says, "Nothing to see here," remember Kom el Nugus. A forgotten city slept under well-studied ruins until a trowel scraped the right angle. How many more alleged voids are hiding temples, vineyards, or entire economies? How many footnotes are really headlines? Keep that question alive, because each shovel of sand, each dusty amphora shard, might flip another chapter of history on its head and invite us to taste a story we never knew existed.